The forest around him was dead. But not dead from time or abandonment, it was a different kind of death, unnatural. It seemed that the trees, bleeding and dried, stood not as witnesses to the years that had passed, but as watchmen, absorbing your every step, your every exhalation. There was no wind, no birds or even insects. Only complete silence, as if nature itself had fallen silent in fear. Jack stood at the edge of the forest, staring at the old map the customer had given him with the same disgust with which he had looked at the empty house as a child. The room, full of things but empty of soul, came immediately to his mind. His father had been a soldier, a tough, unfeeling man who took every opportunity to remind Jack that he had to be strong. His mother, on the other hand, was like a shadow, always there for him, but always somewhere in the distance. Those memories lodged in him like a stone in his throat, making each new day a struggle. That's why he left. The forest, the fields, the abandoned towns, it all seemed clear to him, safe, requiring nothing but survival. But this place was different. He was standing in front of an old entrance to a missile silo, hidden beneath a layer of earth and moss. The mine had long since been abandoned by humans, forgotten. But its darkness, its silence, there was something different here. The client had told him to just go down, to find the artifact, no big deal. But Jack knew it wouldn't be easy. He'd always been surrounded by something wrong. He felt a slight chill run down his spine, as if something invisible had been watching him from the first steps. Jack grabbed the rusty metal ribs of the ladder and began to descend. The stairs creaked shrilly, as if protesting his every step. With each meter down, the sense of unnaturalness grew. It smelled rotten, but not organic. It was a sweet, musty odor that reminded Jack of old musty basements with things stored there, left to rot. Just an old place, nothing special, he muttered to himself, as if to reassure himself. But each step deeper cut him off from the surface, from light, from life. He finally reached the bottom of the shaft, his flashlight picking out the damp walls from the darkness. All around, only puddles, from which strands of green mold stretched, twitching like breath on glass. The tunnels ahead led into the unknown, their gaping maw as if waiting for him to step into it. Each step echoed in the darkness. Puddles beneath his feet trembled alarmingly, as if the water knew something had awakened. Suddenly he heard a whisper, barely perceptible, as if the wind was trying to tell him something. But there was no wind here. Not that way, not that way. He froze, his breath frozen in his chest. But after a second he decided, it was just a play of imagination. Silence, loneliness, they sometimes do strange things to the mind. But something was still wrong. The whispering. It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside him. The tunnel led him into a huge hall. Torn ventilation shafts gaped in the walls, and everywhere, as far as the light of a flashlight could reach, were the remains of old machinery. The silence here was unbearable, too loud. And again that strange noise, as if someone was breathing down his neck. He looked around, nothing. But the flashlight suddenly picked up movement in the far corner. Jack tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun. Where there had been only darkness before, there was something, crooked, disfigured, its skin torn as if it had been stretched over a skeleton. It moved smoothly, silently, as if it never touched the ground. The creature's eyes glowed a sickly green. "Don't come any closer," Jack shouted, but his voice seemed to sink into the air. A second and he fired, 3 shots in quick succession, each ricocheting off the walls, thudding into the depths of the tunnels. The monster collapsed to the floor, but Jack knew that was only the beginning. He ran out of the hall, his heart pounding and his legs refusing to obey. Adrenaline surged in his blood. But when he reached the corridor, he realized the tunnels had changed. They no longer led to an exit. The entire maze was moving, as if its walls were living a life of their own, luring him further and further away. The whispers returned, but this time they were more distinct. Now they spoke in a language he didn't know, but he understood every word. They were calling to him, calling him deep down, into the heart of this ominous mine. "We've been waiting for you, Jack." The voice was like a soft touch on his skin, making him shiver. "Who are you?" He shouted into the void, but instead of an answer, he heard quiet laughter. "You've always been ours, always coming to us. This is no accident. This is your destiny." Jack froze. His consciousness began to crumble. He suddenly remembered his childhood, how his father had told him that there were things he shouldn't think about. But he had. He'd always thought. Fear that something was watching him. That his life was just waiting for something terrible and inevitable. "You can't run away, Jack. You've never run away." He realized it too late. This place wasn't looking for artifacts. It was looking for him. Everything had brought him here, his childhood, his training, his work. This mine knew his weaknesses, his fears. It led him here. When the flashlight flickered again, Jack realized there was no way out. He was no longer in the tunnels, he was in their spawn, in the womb of this place where the walls whispered, where the air pulsed with life. The tunnels are not just a maze. They are an organic entity. It wouldn't let him go. He no longer saw the monsters. Only sensed that they were near, watching. But no longer enemies, but like shadows of his destiny. "You came to us," the walls whispered. "You were what awakened us. Your pain, your loss. We are part of you." Jack couldn't believe it, but he realized that fighting was futile. His life had always led here. And then something broke inside him. He was no longer running. His steps were slow, like a man on his way to execution. The whispers became soothing, not frightening. This place was not just a mine, not just ruins. It was everything he was trying to forget, everything he was running from. He reached the hall where it all began. The walls pulsed again, shaking with whispers. "You're ours, ours, ours," the voice repeated, and this time Jack didn't resist. The lantern went out. He closed his eyes in relief. He didn't care now. The silence around him was filled with life again.